Gentlemen, how are you? I'm so happy standing in front of you. So the lesson that I'm going to present is sentence error types, which is called dangling modifiers. So the previous lesson was about run-on or fuse sentence. So dangling means as a kind of modifier. First modifiers are words. We say something about nouns. We say something about pronouns. So we can say that modifier. So when we say dangling modifier means we consider two clauses here. We consider two clauses. One is the dependent clause and the other is the independent or the principal clause here. So when you say dangling modifier, the dependent clause doesn't modify the principal clause. So that is called dangling modifier. We consider just two clauses here. The subordinate was called the dependent clause and the principal clause. So the dependent clause doesn't say anything about, doesn't modify about the principal subject or the principal clause. So this kind of error is dangling modifiers. So in short, or on the other way, both the principal subject and the dependent subject do not have the same subject. So they are called dangling modifier. Well, the principal subject is similar with the dependent subject. So this is dangling modifier. Yes, dangling modifier here. So a dangling modifier phrase or a clause that either modifies no word in the sentence or refer to the wrong word it means. It doesn't modify anything about the sentence, so it's dangling modifier. It doesn't say signify about the subject or a pronoun, so it's dangling modifier. So in the first case, as explained it, the dependent subject doesn't modify for the principal subject, so that's dangling modifier. Or the dependent subject is different from the principal subject. I repeat, the dependent subject is different from the principal subject, dangling modifier, which means the dependent subject doesn't modify the principal subject, doesn't say anything, doesn't add anything about the principal subject, still dangling modifier. Unless these two clause types doesn't go together, there is also sentence error because it doesn't signify about what it wants to signify. So that's dangling modifier. Very key issue here. Sometimes it makes us confusion to write meaningful sentence when there is a need of writing two clauses in a sentence. So we have to take care of what clauses are dependent, what clauses are principal. So what kind of subject do they use commonly? So we have to be, this is the first issue, to write correct and meaningful sentences here. So this about, dangling modifier causes the sentence to lack what? Coherence it means. If we say dangling modifier, so the sentence doesn't coherence. The sentence doesn't give meaning. So we can say that dangling modifier. The problem is dangling modifier it means. Dangling modifier. So here, if a sentence doesn't modify the correct noun or pronoun, so that's also dangling modifier. Absolutely right. This is the sense of what dangling modifier means. First, we do understand what dangling means. We consider modifiers. Modifiers are words which modify nouns and pronouns. Dangling means we use dangling modifier in a wrong place. Or the modifier that doesn't describe the way, the pronoun or the noun, it describes dangling modifier. So I'm going to give you some more examples regarding how we are going to create a sentence which can be lack of dangling modifiers here. First, hearing the good news, happiness was mine. This is incorrect sentence, or you can say that dangling modifier. Look here, hearing the good news. So what is the sense of the statement here? So what is the dangling modifier here? I'm talking about I myself because there is a pronoun here, mine. So look here, hearing the good news. Who hears the good news? The person. Who is the person? I myself. How do you know? This is mine here. Nothing else. It's not third person. It's not second person. It's not third person singular. It refers about first person speaker, I, because there is a clue here. So the dangling modifier is I. Happiness is not the dangling modifier. Look, happiness and the subject I is not similar. So happiness was mine doesn't describe, doesn't modify the subject I here. So this sentence shows dangling modifier. So here, hearing the good news, who hears the good news? I myself. So it must be corrected by avoiding happiness with the person I, because I got a clue from this one I. So here, hearing the good news, I was happy. So correcting the dangling modifier. So correcting parallel. Who is hearing the good news? I myself. So this and the dependent clause is similar subject. So it modifies here. Hearing the good news, I was happy, one possibility. And the other one, hearing the good news, happy I was. Happy I was. This is also possible, right? So we can create this dangling modifier in this way. Here, entering the room, the light was off. I'm talking about entering the room, which is, I'm talking about the light. Yes, entering the room, the light was off. Yes, and who is entering the room? The person. Yes, nothing else. That is not a kind of animal. It's not a kind of, an object is entering the room. Who is entering the room? I myself, the speaker. So the dangling is I myself. So it must be parallel here. So entering the room, the light was off. While I was entering the room, the light was off. The person who activates the action is I myself, and the second clause should be parallel with the first clause here. So depending on the principal subject, the second clause should be converted into the convenient subject, as it means. Otherwise, there is also a problem. So that kind of problem is dangling modifier. So this is absolutely correct. So I can correct this dangling modifier on this way. So entering the room, the light was off, one possibility. While entering the room, the light was off, another way. And the third one, while I was entering the room, the light went off, or the light was off, is also another ways or possibilities to correct this dangling modifier. And the third example, walking in the park, a snake bite him. Yes. So who is walking in the park? So the dangling is he. The dangling is he, because there is a clue here, him. The dangling is he. And look here, the dangling he is not similar with a snake. Or the dependent clause, a snake doesn't modify the subject he. So this is dangling modifier. So to make it correct, the subject for the first is similar with the subject for the second. So we are going to correct here. So here, working in the park, who is working in the park? He himself, because that was here. Working in the park, he was bitten by a snake. Which is past passive, yes, right. While he was working in the park, he was bitten by a snake. Yes, while working in the park, he was bitten by a snake. A snake bite him is wrong, because they do not show parallel subject here. So the first thing is, there is a clue him, pronoun him. So it must be corrected he, because he is the modifier, the dangling modifier. So it must be parallel with the two clauses. This is also another way of examples about dangling modifier. The fourth example is the participle adjectives. The participle adjectives sometimes used as a dangling modifier. Having arrived late for exercise. Having arrived, which is participle, the perfect participle. Having arrived late for exercise, a written excuse was needed. Who is arrived? Yes, a person, maybe the teacher, the doctor, the coach, the president, the minister, and the other. So it needs a kind of person. Yeah? Having arrived late for, who is arrived late? Maybe a coach, maybe a teacher, maybe a student, maybe a woman. So this sentence needs a kind of person. So here, this needs a kind of person, so we have to find out person it means. Person, arrived late for exercise, yeah. Correct, having arrived late for exercise, the coach needed a written exercise. So this is parallel. Having arrived, who is arrived? The coach. And the coach, and he is the coach. It is parallel. So we can correct these participle adjectives on this way. So the first thing, as I explained repeatedly, what does this sentence refer? Does it show things? Does it show person? So does it show evidence? So we depend to modify, find out the word which modify for the principal subject. Unless we understand this, still we are in dilemma to change or to correct the dangling modifier into the right examples. Yes, having been served lunch, the problem was discussed by the families. Yeah, the problem. I'm talking about the problem, not the families here, which is participle adjectives, but it can be written as past passive, so it doesn't have a correlation, it doesn't have matched meaning, so it is dangling modifier. So sentence errors. It seems meaningful, but it doesn't convey meaning. It doesn't carry meaning because the dependent and the principal subject doesn't have the same subject. So that's a problem. That's a problem. The other example is young and inexperienced. Young. Who is young mean? Young and inexperienced is an adjective phrase. Inexperienced and young, adjective phrase. The task seemed easy to me. I'm talking about I myself because there is a clue here, an objective of the first person me. So the dangling modifier or the dangling is I. Okay? I doesn't modify the task and the task doesn't modify the subject I, or the task doesn't have similar meaning with the subject I. So the problem is writing the task instead of the subject I. So this shows dangling modifier. This shows dangling modifier. So I can carry young and inexperienced. I thought the task is thee. Not the task seemed easy to me, so it is impossible to say. So we are talking about I myself. I thought the task seemed easy. Number 7. While working in the garden, her leg was broken. What does this mean? This is also participle adjectives. While working, participle adjectives. And there is a dependent subject here, her. So the problem is, or the dangling is she. There is a clue here, her. I'm not far from the sentence. I'm not just finding or predicting or guessing what pronoun is in the sentence, because the sentence consists of a kind of pronoun. It talks about a pronoun, a subject, okay? So while working in the garden, her leg was broken. So this is while working, participle adjectives, and here is adjective phrase. So different phrases, different nouns, different noun phrases, different clauses make the sentence dangling modifier. So I can correct here. While she was working in the garden, where do I bring she? Because I get a clue from her. So that is the dangling is she. So I want to make parallel subject here. While she was working in the garden, she broke her leg. Meaningful sentence. She in the second case, similar with she in the first case. It is corrected and meaningful sentence. Or while working in the garden, while working in the garden, she broke her leg is possible. Let me repeat this, please. While working in the garden, she broke her leg is possible. Or while she was working in the garden, she broke her leg is possible. These are the two ways of converting or correcting this dangling modifier. The other number 8. While going to class, a dog bit me. I'm talking about the dangling is I. The dangling is I. And dangling I doesn't modify this a dog. There are no similar subject. Because the subject I doesn't modify a dog, or a dog doesn't modify the subject I. So this makes dangling modifier. So I want to make parallel subject here. So to make it parallel subject, I can get a clue from this one, me. So the sentence talks about I myself, first person. So I can correct here. While going to class, I was beaten by a dog. Yes? While going to a class, I was beaten by a dog. One possible. Or while I was going to class, I was beaten by a dog. While I was going to class, I was beaten by a dog. Another example. So these are the two ways of converting or correcting the dangling modifiers into the correct sentences. So totally, dangling modifier seems difficult, but it's easy. You first understand the two clauses here. Do you think the two clauses have the same subject? No, they don't have the same subject. If they don't have the same subject, that kind of error is dangling modifier. It is different from run-on sentence. It is different from comma splice. It is different from fragment. It is different from misplaced sentence. Dangling makes is special is we think about two clauses. The subject of the two clauses are similar. No dangling modifier. If the subject of the two clauses are not similar, or in short, the dependent clause doesn't modify the principal subject, so this is dangling modifier. In this case, you are able to identify this kind of error is dangling modifier. So you should underline it, please. So dangling is different from the other kinds of sentence error. When you say dangling means as a word, is a phrase which cannot modify nouns and pronouns in a given sentence. So we can say it dangling modifier. I think the more you practice writing correct sentences, the better you'll be a good writer. You'll be a good writer. Thank you very much for giving your attention